This episode is brought to you by Nebula. If you'd like to help support this channel, and the Deprogram, and First Thought, consider signing up for Nebula at the link below. Nothing. You want the honest answer? Not much will actually happen to rich people under socialism. They'll genuinely be fine. A socialist president wouldn't make Jeff Bezos eat 100 billion Amazon boxes until his little tummy explodes. We're not gonna bring out the guillotines and pull up Forbes on our phones. There aren't gonna be free Rotten Tomato boxes from a local organic farm dropped around town. In a socialist society, a former billionaire or CEO would either stay in their position if their workers think they did a good job, or they'd get voted out. Their salary and earnings would probably be reduced so that the gap between the lowest paid and highest paid employee in any company goes down. If they're sitting on a dozen or so empty properties and new housing isn't enough to satisfy everyone's needs, they may only be allowed to keep 2, maybe even 3. If they got wealthy doing something despicable, like dumping toxic waste somewhere, their wealth may be used to fix the things they did wrong. And honestly, that's pretty much it. Nothing will really happen to the rich, as in the actual people. The category of rich will change, but we'll get to that. Anyway, for some reason, a lot of people are worried that socialism means going on a rampage. And the first thing we need to talk about to correct that impression is that most socialists aren't dumb. Every piece of socialist writing that has ever existed is constantly emphasizing that individual wealthy people are not the problem. Socialists in general recognize that almost anyone in Bezos' position would do what he does. Same goes for Zuckerberg, or Musk, or whoever your favorite billionaire is. Exploitation and environmental destruction and doing just about anything for a buck is the name of the game under capitalism, and that's what we take issue with. Not that Jeff specifically is the one doing it. This doesn't stop what these billionaires are doing from being wrong, but most of it is just perfectly legal, and all we'd want to do is change that to put an end to it, not to punish people. Just make the awful stuff stop. Most of us socialists take issue with the system of power and wealth accumulation that is capitalism, not the individuals who inevitably end up at the top. To put it differently, there are millions of jerks out there that are just as evil as Musk, but who are basically powerless simply because, under this economic system, power can only consolidate in a few people's hands. And I can tell you're skeptical. A lot of people are worried about what socialism might look like after a century of Red Scare rhetoric. It also doesn't help that past socialist revolutions, just like the liberal revolutions that gave us capitalism, have often been bloody affairs. It's normal to be concerned about that when people like me talk about making fundamental social and economic changes. The history of big changes hasn't often been a series of peaceful transitions of power. I think most historians would agree that's never been the case. I will point out, though, that there's a tremendous amount of bloodshed required to keep the current system chugging along. Billions of people are kept in artificial poverty when we have enough food and housing for all. Enough jobs that need doing so that no one needs to be unemployed. Enough resources to provide everyone with healthcare and education. Hundreds of thousands of protesters are brutalized by police and army forces when they complain that life is too expensive and the air is getting unbreathable. Not to mention how gruesome wars are constantly waged for the profit of a few defense and oil companies. But even given all that, it's still perfectly normal to be worried about the possibility of additional violence. And that's why I want to make this video. What I want to clear up is the false idea that violence against the wealthy would be a part of regular socialist society, because it simply wouldn't be. The main concern of socialism is equal democratic and economic power, a guaranteed higher standard of living coupled with a more extensive democracy. In this system, essentially, no one should get wealthy enough to exploit someone else and become democratically unaccountable. Businesses compete, the winners monopolize and oligopolize, and basic needs are gatekept while companies are given a license to destroy or appropriate common resources. The ultra-wealthy have an outsized influence in politics and in the workplace, and the entire economy is geared towards maximizing their ability to profit. In some cases, profit and human well-being go together. In most, not so much. Under capitalism, what decides if something happens isn't popular approval, but profitability, which is determined by how much employers exploit their employees, how wealthy or desperate their consumers are, and even how recklessly they can destroy the environment. The idea is to stop all that by bringing the economy under democratic control. To have workers elect their boss, or choose to restructure their workplace entirely based on their expertise in actually doing the work. To have natural monopolies and other parts of the economy controlled by a democratic government. To have some market mechanisms not guided by profit. To replace private banks with public banks, with appointed or elected representatives. Instead of a board of directors trying to figure out how to make workers pee in more bottles, a democratic council would decide the best way to use something like Amazon's distribution network and algorithms to actually benefit society. The point is, nothing happens to wealthy people under this arrangement. The rich are just not part of the plan. Not the individuals, they can stick around. But the idea of someone getting obscenely wealthy in this society seems pretty pointless, and ideally impossible. As a real-life anecdote, look at how the last emperor of China was treated after their revolution. They didn't off the guy. They gave him a re-education, helped him understand why the position of emperor was outdated, and eventually he became a member of China's National People's Congress, helping to make progress alongside the very same people he had previously oppressed. He was reintegrated into a better society. In a future socialist system, the rich and powerful themselves would be fine, but most of the privileges and access to power that create billionaire levels of wealth just wouldn't exist. The only way to become incredibly wealthy in a socialist society is to have a unique set of skills, the way an actor or an athlete becomes incredibly wealthy under capitalism. Being basically irreplaceable might command a higher price for your labor, but even then, you'd still end up with a much more equal society. Some inequality might still persist, but at a much different scale and within a much smaller range. The difference between capitalism and socialism is that you wouldn't be able to get wealthy by paying workers less than the amount they bring in for your company. You couldn't gain wealth by exploitation, and that's it. You're still skeptical. No problem. Here's another reason you shouldn't be worried about what happens to rich people under socialism. Most socialists are very anti-punishment. Just talk to your lefty friends and you'll see. Most socialists today are at the forefront of the restorative and transformative justice movements, as well as the prison abolition and anti-death penalty movements. The most famous representative of this socialist position is probably someone like Angela Davis, who's campaigned for all of these causes for decades. The idea of punitive justice, or the eye for an eye logic that governs a lot of our justice system today, is deeply unpopular in the modern left, and one of the things that socialists are adamantly against. In parallel to socialist ideas about changing systems, we would much rather make crime less economically necessary or less enticing by ensuring everyone's needs are met unconditionally than by threatening people with a violent state apparatus. We would much rather strip people of their power over others and institute a more developed democracy that extends to the workplace than allow a few to gain power through exploitation and punish them when they, predictably, use that power to those ends. Socialists promote structural change first and foremost, and are against punitive justice as a way to solve structural issues. The idea that this would just not apply to those who happen to be wealthy is possible, but realistically very unlikely. And of course, this isn't to say that a socialist society would be without the means to punish people who commit crimes. Historically, after every revolution, there have been elements, often funded by one of the capitalist powers, that tried to undermine the socialist project through acts of terror. This wouldn't be acceptable in a socialist society any more than it is in a capitalist one. Those people would still face the consequences of their actions, whatever those consequences are determined to be. But on the whole, the goal of socialist justice is to be more restorative than punitive, as we saw with the example of the Chinese emperor. I get that all this conflicts with the popular ideas most people have about socialism, but let's be clear. Don't mistake eat the rich sweaters for a policy proposal. With so much violence committed by capitalists and their institutions against the working class and the environment, it's understandable that anger will bubble up and find its expression in edgy slogans. But as far as solutions to capitalism's violence go, eat the rich isn't one of them. Eating the rich without changing the system that reproduces unaccountable billionaires isn't progress. It's just a funny quote. And just in case some of you try to misrepresent what I'm saying, none of this is to say that disruptive protests are illegitimate or anything. Civility and non-violent protests are a sacrifice protesters make. To go in front of armed police forces and refuse to punch back. No one should demand from those who are oppressed that they should continue being oppressed to stay legitimate and valid. This video isn't some kind of condemnation of all violence or an appeal to complacency. I'm simply clearing up the false idea that daily socialist operation depends on punishing the rich, like many pundits seem to imply. The idea you have in your mind that socialists just want to bonk billionaires to solve the problems of capitalism is simply wrong. It's not a solution. Ending a system that produces billionaires is the #1 goal, not hurting people. We don't want jerks with the authority to change our understanding of what qualifies as a toilet. The problem is the system, not the jerks. Let's be even clearer. For someone uber wealthy under capitalism, life under socialism would be different. An end to exploitation and permanently rising inequality would certainly mean fewer privileges. Possibly or even probably a less important status. Certainly less power to boss people around. And most likely, less ability to enjoy excessive luxury at will. But that's probably it. Less power, less privilege, but a life that continues to be more than comfortable as the standards for all of society are raised. Accountability not to boards of directors, shareholders, and the market, but to a democratic workers' association. And perhaps most importantly, the opportunity to be a part of a new project that actually improves the conditions of our species. The thing all these billionaires claim to want to do. Under socialism, they could use that drive, if it's genuine, to really contribute. Socialism is the way forward, even if you're a billionaire. Howdy friends, I'm excited to announce that I'm recording this sponsor read from the brand new Second Thought office. That sounds a little fancier than it really is, but I did recently move the whole studio setup to a larger space, and I've got a bunch of cool stuff planned for the near future. Some of the projects I have in mind, and even being able to move into a new place like this, is only possible thanks to the support of viewers like you. One of the ways you can show that support is by signing up for Nebula. I'm sure you're all aware of Nebula by now. It's the creator-owned streaming platform that's home to content from all your favorite creators, where we can make the content we really want to make. To give you an idea of one of the projects I have in mind, the three of us at the Deprogram are toying with the idea of making a highly produced Nebula original series in a similar style to Blowback, doing a deep dive into an interesting topic in socialist history. But that will only be possible if we can prove there's enough interest. If that sounds like something you'd enjoy, you can let Nebula know by signing up to show there's an audience for the series. If you sign up using the link below, you'll get access to Nebula, and you'll be directly supporting your 3 favorite socialist creators and all our current and future projects. Besides helping us, you also get access to a ton of excellent content from amazing creators, from Tom Nicholas to Our Changing Climate to Not Just Bikes. The annual plan is just $30 for an entire year. I honestly think that's an amazing deal for all the great content on Nebula. So if you'd like to help support our work and get access to the streaming platform built and owned by the creators, sign up for Nebula using my link below. It really does help support me and educational creators all across YouTube. If you enjoyed this video, consider dropping a like. If you hated it, a thumbs down. You can watch my other content by following the links on your screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.